Hello, my name is Arlette Hart. I'm with Appgate, and I am introducing the next panel. But in the meantime, I wanted to say one of the lines that came towards the end of the last one really struck me, and I had it on my notes of things to talk about. We're just a bunch of people doing this stuff, okay? In case you were thinking that somehow there's this magic machine that is out there that is doing all these things and we're just doing this little cog part of it, we're a bunch of people doing what we can to secure this infrastructure. There's different skills, different abilities, but you know, at the end of the day, we do what we can, we're doing the best we can. When we're doing the training piece of it, you know, one of the comments was, you know, don't have the hiring manager just donate all the burden to the employee or potential employee. True, but I've been on the other side of that too, and writing those things and trying to get them so that you can get all the right candidates in place at the right time. Heavy lift. We really try to get the right people and to be open-minded about it and to really pick great human beings with the right skills. We're working on it. You know, we're just a bunch of people doing this stuff in place and time. Supply chain. Have we talked a lot about supply chain yet? Yes, I am wasting time. We needed to switch some microphones, so I'm doing this. Anyway, when I think supply chain, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, supply chain, it's just the other systems, the people that you've bought things from over time. Think a little broader. Your car is part of your supply chain, right? Your brother is part of your supply chain. All those people that you have dependencies on every single day. I used to work at the Bureau. I was Chief Information Security Officer there, and it became extremely clear that everybody you run into is part of your supply chain. We ready? Okay, now, truncating that conversation, we're moving from regulation to emerging technology. Oh, wait. There's a questionnaire. Please go to your LinkedIn site and say how valuable the last session was. And I thought it was great. I thought it was really interesting and really insightful. And one of the things that I'm going to tell you about this next session, which is Planets Collide, Exploring Emerging Tech Convergence. And the interesting part of the emerging tech convergence right after the regulatory conversation is those two pieces collide like nobody's business. AI, how are you going to regulate that? Post-quantum, ooh, not a trivial thing either. So in order to introduce this, hold on a second. I'm old, that's the way it goes. Angelique Napoleon, Cybersecurity Director and Division Deputy CISO for GDIT's Intelligence and Homeland Security Division in Washington, D.C. Do you want me to read the whole thing? Do you want me to read the whole thing? Okay. And then along with her are some people that I've known and some people that I have not known. Jen Savada, President and Global Public Sector Sandbox AQ. Lexi Gunther, whom I've known for a long time, who is the CIO at Leidos. Dr. Diana Allen, Senior Tech Program Manager at Google. And Jeffrey Schaefer, Head of Responsible AI and Chief AI Ethics Advisor from Booz Allen Hamilton. All right. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm joined by some amazing people up here. I have Dr. Diana B. Allen. She's the Senior Technology Program Manager at Google. She's an experienced cybersecurity leader who has strategic and tactical level experience with AI, enterprise risk management, information security, and a recognized leader in our industry. She's also a Howard University School of Business alumni.
Woo! Woo!
Next, I have Jeffrey Schaefer. He's Head of Responsible AI at Booz Allen Hamilton. He's Head of Responsible AI, and he's Chief of AI and the Chief AI Ethics Advisor. Jeff has written and spoken about the importance of responsible AI and produced a series of podcasts with Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. Let's hear it for Jeffrey. Next up, we have Alexandra Gunther. She's the Chief Information Security Officer and board member of the Cyber Guild Foundation for Leidos. So welcome, Lexi.
Thank you.
She's a thought leader, and she's got 20 years executive experience, and she's successfully leading our global operations, enterprise IT, for research and development. So thank you, Lexi. Next, I have Jen Savada. She's the Chief Executive Officer for Boadicea Solutions, and she's also a Cyber Guild 2023 Alliance Leader Awardee. She's highly experienced in AI and quantum professional, and she's the founder and CEO. She's got her proven track record, and she's an adjunct professor at Georgetown University for Quantum Information Sciences. Welcome. So we're going to start off the fun. So we're going to start off with Jeffrey. Can you level set, please, for the group, what AI is and its importance?
Sure. First of all, great to be here. I picked up some sort of cold this weekend, so if I flub any of my answers, I'm going to blame it on that. Not contagious.
It's a little late, Lex, so you can scoot.
It is a little late, yeah. So AI, it is, as many of you know in the room, probably many different types of underlying technologies. The one that has captured the world's attention over the last year and change is called generative AI. There's a few different versions of that as well. We know mostly LLMs, but there's also something called diffusion models. So that's the AI that's producing videos. And then multimodal, which is the thing I'm most excited about. That's where you can take any sort of data in and produce a different data modality out. So you can have thermo-imaging come in, you can have car horns, and you can say, hey, based on this noise, produce me a scene based on the characteristics of the sound that has come in. You can get a scene of gridlock on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Many different other technologies as well that are coming down the pike, agentic systems, neurosymbolic systems. Maybe we can get nerdy with that stuff today, but by and large, generative AI is really the stuff that's taken over right now.
Great. Jen, can you level set for the group what quantum cryptography is and how it can be harnessed for data security and analysis?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I know that there's been a little bit of discussion today about post-quantum cryptography, which is horribly named. It should be pre-quantum cryptography, or we can just call it quantum-resistant cryptography. And the idea there is that we need to have an ability to use different types of math in order to protect all of our encrypted systems from quantum attack. What's happening is that the likes of China and others are doing store now, decrypt later attacks, where they're harvesting all of our data, storing it in data centers with the goal of decrypting everything once they have a quantum computer. So we now have to be prepared to do and protect our data before those quantum computers are there and available and really able to do this because of that storing and stealing of the data. And what it does is traditional encryption takes factored math. So you take two prime numbers, you multiply them together, and you get a very large number. And the way that you decrypt something is by trying to figure out what those two prime numbers are. But now, with post-quantum cryptography, which NIST just recently approved the algorithms and standards, the goal is to use a different type of math. And I call it almost like 3D math. And instead of using numbers, you use shapes and figures, such as a lattice structure or isogenic structures. And through that, it creates a very challenging problem for quantum computers to break.
Okay. Doesn't sound like anything I'm going to be solving soon with math.
This is not your mother's math.
1 + 1 does not equal 2. Dr. Allen, let's start off. It's going to be a two-pronged question.
Okay.
All right. Can you elaborate on the intersectionality of cybersecurity, AI, and quantum for satellites and what challenge this presents to the cyber profession in terms of skilling? Are we going to need special upskilling? Are we going to need reskilling of our current workforce in the cyber industry?
Sure, so I won't speak to satellites
Okay.
at all. However, we actually will need upskilling. And so when you think about standard computing, just as she was mentioning, how we were taught is completely different than what's happening. There are two elements that we need to consider when you're thinking about upskilling. Not just the engineers and the developers that need to understand power clusters or understand how to leverage quantum, and how do you take what you've built traditionally through traditional coding mechanisms and leverage it and do it and implement it on a quantum computer. But you also need management and leadership to understand how to solve business problems using quantum. So have you thought about that? We can all build a program to optimize our program management, but how do you do that, for example, from a quantum lens? And so companies and organizations need to think about how to create room and opportunities to allow people to explore and to learn how to use and harness those skills. So you take what you have as a baseline, you learned in undergrad, you learned in graduate school, you build upon it and you expand your aperture so that you're able to address broader business problems. And so when you're able to do that in a safe environment, we're not as worried about AI replacing us, but there are several people, and research indicates that we want to future-proof our careers, and folks will want the opportunity to learn how to do it. So there are tons of open source ways for individuals to learn how to do that, but everyone does not have the free time. So think about it, whether you are at the ground level or in leadership or a manager, how are you empowering and enabling your workforce to think about solutions differently and then explore the possibility of learning to make that happen?
I think that's great. Alexandra, can you tell us some of the great things that Leidos has been doing for upskilling and how you're going to help the leadership in here?
Absolutely. The conversations earlier today around skills-based hiring, what you were just talking about, is really at the forefront of what a lot of our companies, including Leidos, are really looking at, making sure we can fully empower our employees. And one of the things that we're doing, obviously, is the technical upskilling, just the opportunity connectedness, creating more opportunities for communities of engagement is something that we're really focused on. So, at the basic level, it's combining like with like, right? Like skills or similar mindsets, and making sure that those communities have an opportunity to engage, whether that's formally or informally. We talked this morning about folks taking their career in their own hands, right? Having to write their own job descriptions, maybe not going that far, but certainly making sure that they understand who else in the company is doing something similar. So Leidos is a global 50,000 person company providing primarily IT services. And so it runs the full gamut, everything from AI-enabled technologies to help desks and call centers and everything in between. So we've got a wide variety of skill sets and career paths. Navigating career paths is something that's, I think, just a lifelong journey that we're all on. Understanding and making those connection points, having us provide that to our employees, and then figuring out how technology can help us do it better. So this is a great opportunity for our HR technologies and all of our digital assistant technologies, AI-enabled, are allowing us to say, hey, tell me who else is doing digital engineering in the company. Hey, can you tell me who else is performing testing on these kinds of systems? And so if you have AI-enabled connectedness within your company, you're actually able to use that to further connect your employees. And so just think those through as a leader and as a technologist within your companies. Take that back and try to understand what not just business problems can we solve with these technologies, but what people problems can we solve and really allow our employees to fully explore their career options.
Cool. So you have like a mentorship program?
So we have mentorship programs, both formal and informal, at the executive level as well as all throughout levels of the corporation. As much as possible, I always advocate for self-service, so that means employees take their journey in their own hands. I had a mentor once tell me, no one will ever care more about your career than yourself, and that is how it should be. So don't expect everyone else to be like, why didn't I get tapped on the shoulder for that? Make sure people know what you're interested in. And so mentees can say, hey, I would love for this person to be my mentor. When I took the CIO position, I actually within a month had someone reach out to me and say, I would love for you to be my mentor. I was like, awesome, because in the system they saw there was job movement and they wanted to connect with the new CIO. So there's stuff like that, as well as then the technical skills and the soft skills. Most of our HR technologies, as well as things like LinkedIn, and there's so much available free sourcing for soft skill upskilling, right? How to connect, how to reach out, how to grow your network. So don't forget about those free resources too.
Okay. So our next question, Jen, I'm going to start with you. What are the key policies in quantum that we need to keep our eyes on?
Yeah, so especially related to the cyber realm, there's been a lot of policies that have come out from the White House and from OMB and from others. And the ones to be particularly aware of are there's 2 national security memos. There's National Security Memo 8 and National Security Memo 10. And they talk about zero trust as well as post-quantum cryptography and the need to migrate to post-quantum cryptography. So the thing is, we've had a lot of conversations about zero trust and how cool it is, but zero trust isn't complete without post-quantum cryptography. Because if your encryption can be broken, the rest of zero trust really doesn't matter. So understanding what those national security memos direct and dictate, which is starting off with an inventory of all of your encryption, and then how do you migrate and transform and remediate into post-quantum cryptography are important. And then there's the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act as well, which talks about how do we get ready for these quantum computers and how, as a government, do we need to be prepared. I will say, however, we were talking about regulation in the previous one, is that a lot of the regulated industries like banks and others are also using these documents as a baseline for what they need to be thinking about and doing as the regulations struggle to catch up with the private industry, because they don't want to be caught short-footed and having to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines because they were not prepared for the next type of encryption, next type of technology that is available.
Thank you. Jeff, bounce it to you. What do you see the key cybersecurity policies that have come out? What do you see the impacts in our industry?
I think so the policy landscape right now is hugely dynamic. And what's been really interesting from my vantage point at Booz Allen is how little policy has tried to tie the knots together between cyber and AI, despite those interconnectivity, the interconnectivity of those 2 disciplines being so tight and getting tighter. I talk about this a lot with my buddy Aaron St. Miller, who runs our cyber AI practice. I will say that in general, I think there's kind of 3 challenges with getting policy right, particularly in AI, but at the intersection of the 2 for sure. The first is kind of that classic dynamic between more security or more freedom. There's an analogous dynamic, and certainly in AI, between more utility or more safety. And I think we're going to be wrestling with that continuum for years to come. The second is this concept called the unit of governance. So coming from a philosophy background, when you're looking at a use case, an AI being applied to something to achieve X, Y, or Z outcome, there's context and specificity that drives that use case. And only by what the Jesuits call descending into the particulars and understanding that nuance and that complexity at that use case level, can you actually start to drive effective policy interventions. Now, that makes sense at that unit level, but how do you scale that up nationally and internationally? Again, something that we're still going to be wrestling with for years now. And then the third thing is emergent behavior. So with generative AI systems in particular, the combination of generative AI and cyber, especially, we have emergent properties. These systems have behavior, propagate risks that we didn't train them on, that we couldn't have predicted ahead of time by the very nature of what emergent behavior is. And so the example I use is, ChatGPT 4 can code you a video game, but it was not trained to code video games. It was trained on as much of the world's data as it possibly could have been, and that just happened to include how to code video games. And so that's a cool emergent property, but you can imagine all sorts of emergent properties on the downside. And so those 3 challenges, when you stitch them together and then you apply them to the intersection of AI and cyber, there's how we approach that is, I think it's still a jump ball. Going slow makes sense in a lot of cases, but the technology is moving so quickly. So how do we move at the right pace? I think for policy nerds like myself, it's a fun time to be wrestling with those questions.
That's a good one. So Jen, I'm going to kick that over to you as well. You see the quantum where we're trying to play catch up, it seems. What are your thoughts? Are we playing catch up or are we ahead of the game?
So I think that it depends. because there's many different types of quantum technology. Most people just focus on quantum computing, but there's actually a lot more than quantum computing. There's quantum secure communications. There's also post-quantum cryptography, which is a subset of that, which could be seen as a quantum adjacent technology, as well as quantum sensing. So depending on where you are in the quantum spectrum, we're either behind or ahead or kind of head to head with a lot of other countries as well as our adversaries. The thing that's most interesting about this is the amount of spending that is being spent, or the amount of money that is being spent for quantum at the moment. As of 2023, there was about $36 billion to date that has been spent on quantum technology. Of that 36 billion, roughly 15 billion of it has been spent by China. And so you figure that, and the rest of the world makes up the majority of the other, or all of the other, half of that. But when you look at the United States, for example, we have about 3.75 billion that has been put into the National Quantum Initiative, which is a government-led funding initiative, and then several other billion that are part of venture funding and other types of private industry funding. It's still a small percentage when you look at that compared to China. So how do we maintain the advantage in a technology where you have a large sum of money, you have the public-private intersection in China where there isn't a divide, so they work very closely together with government and their industry. And then in the United States, we have ethics and morals and values and things that also guide how we deal with technology. So we need to be aware of it, we need to look to it, and then not only look at that quantum technology, but how do we protect against the quantum technologies that could be used against us?
Okay. So I'm going to punt over to you, Alexandra. We have niche markets like quantum. They're going to offer unique opportunities, and we're going to see these pop up. What are the impacts with the careers? We talked earlier about upskilling. Are we just going to grow quantum and cybersecurity skill sets from kindergarten on up, like some countries like Israel do, where they start at a very young age? Where do you see that going in this country?
Yeah, I think, it's a great question, and it's a great challenge to have for our country, because the opportunity space is very ripe for us right now. I do think we have to incorporate it into our common vernacular and our lives, just the same way we've seen ChatGPT infiltrate, right, all aspects of our life at all age groups. We want to do similar kinds of conversations and education with quantum. And from a level of mentorship and engagement at all levels, we see STEM education continuing to be a focus in this country, and I love that. And I would encourage everyone, if you're not part of a STEM community and encouraging and mentoring the younger generations, please do so. It's so important. We cannot afford as a country, from a cyber perspective, from a security perspective, from a national perspective, to fall behind in not just the investment, but the focus of having STEM, quantum, AI type conversations at every level. And so engendering curiosity is one of the best ways to really make sure that the future generations have an eye and an ear towards what they could do in this area. So engaging with the communities, quantum and post-quantum, or if that's a dirty word, just quantum, capabilities are here to stay. And so from a Leidos perspective, we have research and development investments in the areas that Jen was just mentioning, from software development to the physical spaces, even applying AI to how we detect and look at cyber threats. We have partnerships, and I would also encourage folks to engage with other industry partners. Some of the disruptive partners we have coming out in the quantum and AI space, phenomenal, brilliant minds being applied to this with technology over top, and we've got some great capabilities. So I would encourage everyone to continue to take those phone calls from our industry partners and from folks who are doing cool things in this space, because we can continue to figure out how we can apply that further and further. And then the other piece is, let's not forget about the public-private partnerships. You were mentioning policy, and how can we engage and influence policy at all levels is thinking through how quantum and AI applies to our everyday life as well as our business lives. And then us and our employees having a seat at the table when NIST and NSA are talking about are these algorithms correct? What would your inputs be? Can you test these out for us? Can you look at these policies and give us feedback? They are listening. NIST and NSA are key partners for us to continue to evolve, whether you're in high school and you're interested, or if you're well into your career and interested. So engaging at all levels and all ages, I think, is for sure here to stay.
Dr. Allen, what are your thoughts?
So I think we need to think about, not ignore critical elements. I'll take a step back. So my area of expertise is security, controls, compliance. We cannot eliminate the human capital element at all, but I think we also need to look at policy. So your question was in relation to the workforce and how we're evolving. There are recent regulations and recent guidance on K through 12 education and how we are giving parents permission, how we require parent permission to give children access to AI tools. Is that happening in other countries? I can't say yes or no, but as you look at more stringent regulations, so the EU has tons of regulations, we as the cyber workforce need to understand the seats that we sit in. Everybody looks very comfortable here. You're sitting in great seats. But let's think about it. How many of you have aging parents? Everybody's parent is aging. Everybody should raise their hand. Okay, so when you think about it, my mom is in her 70s. She's not here, so I can say that. She is very proud of the fact that somebody called me and said they were the IRS, and I told them no. Like, she's very proud of the fact that an automated bot contacted her. So you need to look at the seat that we sit in and how we are continuing to propagate education. And look at what the policies are. And think about where we sit in terms of the margins of society. So those that are very young, so we're trying to protect our children from threat actors. And we were just talking about that before we walked in here, about how a hacker can go and hack into your computer system and look at your children, look through your Ring camera, look through your Simply Safe or whatever. I'm not trying to freak you out because I'm not a hacker, but we were having that conversation about how we need to protect ourselves. And so as we sit here and we're actively working, we need to think about, don't forget about the policies, don't forget about the controls, understand what the landscape is. Because if we protect ourselves so much that we don't want to invest in the technology and explore it, we will be behind. And that goes for my 6-year-old who's trying to use Siri and Alexa to learn how to read instead of phonics, or my mom who is so excited that the IRS tried to fake call her, which is not true, right? And so, and we're proud of that fact. So that also comes to what Lexi is saying, the community, the engagement, not just focusing on all of us that are in cyber, but spreading it out. What about the staff, the workers? Because AI, quantum, all of those elements are still very active. They're going to continue to evolve. They're going to be a part of our healthcare. They are already a part of our education systems. They are already a part of HR hiring decisions. There are algorithms that are being used to evaluate our qualifications, whether it's a contract, whether it's our skills, whether it's our college application or someone's college application. All of those things are being used in every day. We cannot forget about the policy, and we need to be a part of those conversations and then educate people on what it says, because it's not always written in plain English where someone can understand what that means. And so we have that benefit of knowing and understanding, and we should use it in a way that's for good.
I just want to add one other thing. As you were talking about educating our children, it reminded me, I had to have a conversation with my kids that certainly my parents never had to me, and that was, how do you know if the picture you're looking at is real or not? How do you spot a deep fake? And while in some cases that's extremely scary to have that conversation, and certainly the conversation we had at lunch showed that as well, that's also an opportunity space, because that sparks curiosity and interest. How do you make a picture that's so real my human eye can't tell? And that is an incredible opportunity for kids to get hooked on finding this as a field and a potential.
Yeah, making it fun again. Great. Jeff, I'm going to kick something over to you. How is AI a threat, or is it going to enhance diversity as we train our models to prevent bias?
Okay, I missed the first part.
How is AI a threat? Is it a threat? Is it something that we're going to...
It's not. It's completely safe. It's fine.
Okay. I trust you. We're good.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good.
There's never bias.
That's
Hallucinations, but
I will offer somewhat of a counterintuitive sliding into controversial thought with bias and AI. I think bias has utility. So I talk about this a lot. At one point in time, we did not know that zip codes were a proxy for race. We probably should have, but we didn't. Then we got a bunch of data together in one place, and that correlation became clear. Now, we obviously haven't solved that, but for policymakers, there's what's called targeted policy interventions. So it's a little bit of a truism, but like the more you know about a problem, the better and more accurate you can design policy interventions to solve that problem. The less you know, the more broad brush your policy is going to be, which will result in it being either ineffective or overly stringent, or it will produce outcomes, second order outcomes that you didn't anticipate. And so you're creating net new problems. So I think AI could very well be the greatest public policy making tool we've ever created, because it is so good at illuminating all of our malicious and implicit biases across society with the requisite complexity and nuance that we need as society to address those things. And so if we have machinery around this such that we're systematically sort of extracting those biases out of these systems and the different use cases and the way we're using them to understand at that more fundamental first principles level what is happening, that gives us a lot of power to do something about it. So bias isn't going anywhere. So like Rahm Emanuel said, let's not waste the crisis. Let's take this as an opportunity to feed that into our public policy making apparatus, such that we can get closer to ground truth for how these issues manifest across society, and actually hopefully attempt to solve some of them.
Yeah, and if we could just, I'm going to call an audible, if we could just riff on this for a second, because I love what you said about bias being a utility. And I think these kinds of conferences that we're talking about here about diversity of thought being so critical to applying it to cyber problems is also for AI and the reduction of bias, right? The more diverse thought and individuals involved in creating and training AI module, why can't I think of the word? Models, thank you, is going to reduce then that outcome of potential bias on the outside. And I think it's just really an incredible application for diversity of thought, diversity of individuals contributing on the front end to create a better product on the back end.
So I am going to be controversial and say that bias is a utility to those who are not adversely impacted by it. It's the case. So Sony released research to indicate that AI models are ineffective at determining yellow and red undertones in skin. That is not on either end of the spectrum of, I do not have red undertones in my skin. And so you're talking about, and where they called it out, you're talking about Asian citizens, you're talking about Indian citizens, individuals that are not on the spectrum of black or white, right? And so when you are looking at a system that is set up to identify someone that is considered a threat, you're looking at one that has an 80%, that is 70 some odd percent accurate in determining whether you are the culprit or someone else. That 30% is a life-changing difference. And so the utility of it is only helpful for us in the future, but the utility is not equally reactive in fixing it when you or someone you love has been impacted, right? And so I said it, I prefaced it beforehand. But when you think about algorithms indicate that men are more aggressive than women, that's not always the case because there are women prisons. So that's not, is that true? It's not. So you can find the most docile man and he's going to be, whether he's black, white, brown, yellow, or purple, he's going to be considered more aggressive than a woman. And there are women that are beating men down any day. It's true. And so we need to be very honest about what we're considering utility and how we're thinking it's useful, because it's not equally useful. Children, everyone says children are off the table, but children are victims of certain things as well. So, and that's regardless of color. Girls, boys, all in between. We need to really think about how we are leveraging the biases and how we are coming up with mitigation plans to evaluate our use cases, to see if bias has slipped in, because it's not always malicious. Sometimes it just happens, right? You have preferences. We have things that we like. You might like a short man. You might like a tall man. It's a preference, not a prejudice, I like to think, right? And so if you do it in that way and you understand it and you assume positive intent, so this is where I think that the other panelists are coming from. We're trying to learn and we're trying to improve. Absolutely. But the academic literature and the life literature, if you turn on the news, is going to indicate something different. And you cannot blame it on the algorithm. You can't say it's the system. You can't say it's the quantum computer. It's also the individuals who are programming these things. It is also the individuals who are not looking at the use cases. It is also on us as leaders in the industry to go back and say, let's take a second and take a look. Did I incorporate? And I do that as a program manager. I look at my teams and I'm like, I'm a morning person or not? Do I have people that are representing all parts of the spectrum and who would need our support in terms of security? So we as leaders need to do the same thing. Lexi mentioned like pairing with like for mentorship. That is not beneficial in AI. Period, point blank, hard stop. It's not. Like versus like is not gonna work. I don't wanna connect with people that, I can connect with them at home. I can connect with them anywhere. I wanna connect with Lexi, who's at Leidos, and I'm at Google. What are you doing in the consulting industry? What are you doing with your clients? Jeff, what are you doing? That's why I wanna connect, because that's where thought leadership happens. It's not gonna be just by victimizing, and some people are victims, everyone is not, and saying it's a utility because it's for the greater good. No. I think we should challenge that, especially coming out of here, and look at how can this be used in a way in which we do not intend? And if it is used in that way, how do we fix it? Not, let's fail fast and learn quickly. No. Go back and fix what got messed up and who was impacted. Don't just learn from it, add it in a retro, consider it done, and move forward. Because there are people's lives who could be adversely impacted by this.
So I want to.
No, I love it. Jen? I mean, it's kind of hard to come behind that one.
That's okay. Can I add something to that?
Yes,
Because I
please.
love this. I absolutely love this. There is an example, for example, at Amazon, where they decided that they were going to get after the lack of diversity in their gene pool and who their workers were. And so they decided to say, you know what, we've got really high quality workers here. We're going to input all of their resumes into our AI system that is going to help us find the best candidates. And then all of a sudden, all the candidates that they found were white men, because it was the exact same types of people that were being put into the resume system. So the thing that we always have to consider, we always hear, well, there's not enough people in the talent pool to increase the diversity of the population. That's absolutely not true.
Correct.
It's the fact that our systems are designed to find the people that already are in the system. And so we have to figure out, how do we change that in order to create the system that we want, that enables us to have all of the things that we've talked about up here, in order to get after the things that we need to do to make this the best tech, cyber, just even world that we have.
I want to pull out one point from this conversation I think is hugely important that they touched on, which is the temporal aspect of utility. Totally agree that there's a bunch of things that could happen to you now that public policy, if it ever fixes, is going to have a months, years long lag. So that's why I think one of the underrated aspects of policy, our toolkit, is mechanisms for recourse. And so if a facial recognition system denied you X or Y outcome or made a decision about you erroneously because of how it was trained, et cetera, and the bias behind those models, do you actually have recourse to counteract that decision? If you don't, now we have a system of systems that is propagating bad outcomes across society and only entrenching that bias. And maybe we'll get to it years down the line with different types of policy. But right now, I think we just don't have enough mechanisms of recourse across society. The EU is trying to take this approach where they look at use cases and risk-based sort of a layer over those use cases. If it meets this threshold, we want to put these types of controls on it or ban it outright. I think that gets us closer. to start in a broad way, looking across society and looking at these technologies and where we do or don't at all want to be using them, or if we're going to use them, the specific types of controls that we need to layer on top of them, or the guardrails that we need to put around them. And again, I think a really big aspect of that is these mechanisms for recourse. Like if a decision was made adversely against you, you shouldn't be just out of luck. You should have some way of correcting that or protesting that.
I think that's a
I
good
agree.
point.
We need to have a way of rectifying quickly. And everybody in this room can leverage their voice to do that, to encourage and say, but what else? Let's also make sure. And that's regardless of where you sit at the table. How do we make, it shouldn't take years to fix the fact that I was wearing a hijab in the airport and now I can't, I'm on a list, or I was pulled aside. It should not take years to rectify that. It should be just as quick as the computing and just as quick as you were able to make that assessment, you should be able somewhat quickly to be able to fix it. And so we need to encourage that as technologists to say, again, how could this be used in a way that we do not intend? Trust but verify, right? And say, if we had this, how could we fix it?
And
So
diversity
conducting
of-
the assessment before implementing the technology is important.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what I was trying to say is the diversity of thought at the onset, like in the beginning, right? Just like with systems engineering and requirements and all of that, we found out how hard it is to do it on the back end. It's the same thing with AI and these technologies. So we got to do it on the front end and encourage as many people at the table, as like you said, as possible.
Think about your teams, break it down. So what you were mentioning, it was the topic of my doctoral dissertation. And I had a different chair, and he said, there's no shortage of women in the workforce. And I was like, what are you talking? So my dissertation was the role of empowerment on women in STEM. And I stated that we have a shortage of women in leadership positions when women are not the minority in the population. Women are 51% of the population, and oftentimes the key decision makers in the household in terms of, and stimulators for economy. And so he said, there's not a shortage of women in leadership. And I was like,
Data.
I don't understand. And I said that. And he was like, you have confirmation bias. And so we went into it. And I was like, okay, let's rethink this problem. And he said, just because there are 10 women that apply for a role, are you trying to say that all 10 are qualified? Are you trying to say that all 10 are interested? And are you saying that you should get 5? Because then that might be an overrepresentation. So I had to go and find the data. And I was like, I can point to 100 people that I know that were impacted. And he's like, and I can point to 100 people that weren't. But as a white man in technology and in the world, and he gave me this whole analogy, and we have never met. And I was like, sir, we can talk about it. And so actually what I wound up doing was shifting the focus a little bit to understanding the why. And what came out of it is you can take, and I'm going to use you guys to my right, is it's not that you're more qualified or you're less qualified. There was a study done by PwC where they put badges on people, and they indicate, and the argument was that men have greater access to leadership than women, supposedly, right? And a lot of people will say that. It's because I don't have access, I don't have the social capital, it's the good old boys club, it's this, it's that, right? And I'm gonna bring it back around, just work with me on it, okay? And what the data found, because they put the badges on them, was they found that Lexi and Jeff had equal access to leadership. The challenge was the bias and the perspective on her performance versus his. So it's not that you don't have access in the meetings, it's the person that will say, well, Lexi has kids, she mentioned that, we don't want to give her this. And then you have the mom tax versus the dad praise, right? And so where it starts to level out is when people use their voices, which is what I'm trying to encourage you guys to do, and say, well, what about Lexi? Well, so who cares? She has a whole other person that helps raise those kids. Like she's, like it's not just her. And those are the things that help to propel and move forward. So when we are thinking about diversity of thought in teams, we also need to think about who's on the team. Who is on the team? Do you have representation of age? Do you have representation of socioeconomic background? Is everyone there, or is it a closed door meeting? Because that happens to women, that happens to minorities, that happens to young people, where this is a director level or above conversation. This is a senior manager or above conversation. And that analyst is the one that can give you some reverse mentoring and let you know as an executive what's happening on the ground. So we need to really open up our minds and think about Are we encouraging diversity of thought all the way at the ground level, from requirements, when we're looking at policies in our organizations, to how we're implementing for our organizations or clients? I don't think we're doing that across the board because we're not intrinsically trained to do it. So you need to think about, not I have that one white friend, I have that one Asian friend, I have that one black friend. That's not what you're doing. You want to think about, are we looking like, does our team look like the population that we are trying to serve? And majority of people in here are serving people that do not look like one race or one gender. Last I checked, right? And so we need to really think about that and challenge that and take a moment, sit down while you're having lunch and say, do I have everyone that I could have? And if I don't be afraid and be so far removed that you're not going to reach out to that analyst. Now tell them in advance why you are reaching out to them so they don't think they're getting fired. You got to promote psychological safety. But you can also say, I just want to pick your brain and find out what you're talking about. I graduate, AI was not a thing when I went to college. So help me understand, AI was not taught. It was there, but it was not taught. So help me understand. And that's where we really get that diversity of thought. And that's how you really differentiate yourself in the marketplace as a key deliverer of some type of public capability or some type of client capacity that you're trying to monetize.
I think that's great.
I'm passionate about it. Just get me work. You only had to
you
get me
got some
warmed
feelings.
up.
I could feel
almost
it. I could feel it. No, I want to thank all of you for coming up here. I think it shows the diversity. We're represented well. We have men, we have women. I mean, thank you, Doctor. I want to thank everyone. If you can stick around after all of the sessions, you'll be able to network with all of us and get more passion from Dr. Allen. She's got plenty to share. But I want to thank all of you for sitting up here with me today, and I'm sorry we went over. But thanks again for having us.